The wind came in low over the plains that morning, dust rising like old ghosts, whispering across the cracked earth of a town too used to silence. Dry and sun-hardened, the streets of Whittler's Hollow stretched like open wounds under the weight of the sun. Doors creaked on their hinges, and shutters leaned half-closed, not from the wind, but from something meaner, fear. A girl was being dragged. Her dress, once white, now tattered and brown with mud and blood, caught on sharp rocks and the occasional stray nail embedded in the ground. Her body slid more than it walked, boots gone, one arm twisted behind her back, the other shielding her face as if the sun itself might strike her down. Two riders yanked her along like she was cattle. They weren't just any men, they were Eldon Gratch and his younger brother Jesse, sons of Beau Gratch, the land baron who owned every fenced inch of soil within 50 miles. The town didn't just obey the Gratches. It feared them, paid them, bled for them. And now, it seemed, it would look the other way as they threw a girl into the dirt like she was nothing but a lesson waiting to be learned. She was no stranger to pain, this girl. Her name was Eva May Holloway, and if the town still had a memory, and most of it did, it would remember that name once meant something. Her father, preacher Amos Holloway, had built the chapel with his own hands and baptized half the town's children. But that was before the war, before the sickness, before the fire that took him and left her staring at smoke and embers. That was before the Gratches laid claim to the Holloway land, digging false deeds out of thin air and daring anyone to argue. No one had. The sheriff stood on the porch of his office, hat tipped forward, chewing a toothpick like a man performing boredom. He didn't say a word. His star-shaped badge gleamed faintly in the sun, but it may as well have been tin hammered out of old lies. Eva's mouth was split. Blood touched her lips like ink on a page. She coughed once, twice, then lifted her chin as Jesse kicked her forward. She stole from Pa, Jesse sneered, his teeth too white for his dirt-caked face. Took a saddlebag from the stable last night. Had coin in it. I didn't, Eva rasped, voice brittle but unbent. It was my father's land. That saddlebag's been in our barn since I was 10. That coin. Jesse backhanded her. She staggered. A murmur passed through the crowd gathering at the edges, no closer than necessary. Women held their children tighter. Men narrowed their eyes but didn't step forward. Everyone knew Beau Gratch could buy a bullet faster than a loaf of bread. And he wouldn't waste time with trials. I don't care whose saddle it was, Eldon said, voice slow and deliberate, like dripping pitch. You took something that don't belong to you anymore. That's what thieves do. And in this territory, thieves don't last long. You took everything, she whispered, meeting his eyes with something that refused to break. And you're the one who's scared I'll take it back. That earned her a boot to the ribs. From across the street, sitting outside the saloon, he watched. The man didn't speak. Didn't move. Just sat, one leg crossed over the other, hat low over his eyes, a sliver of matchstick between his teeth. He had the look of a man who'd come far from nowhere with nowhere left to go. Luke Carver, though no one knew his name yet, watched the scene unfold the way a man might watch a dust storm roll in, inevitable, cruel, and not his business. Not yet. The Gratch boys tied Eva's hands behind her back and threw her down beside the old well. She landed hard, breath escaping like wind from a kicked dog. Let her cool there, Eldon said. Then we'll talk justice. Or rope. Depends on how the sun treats her. The sheriff grunted. Just keep it off my doorstep. They left her there, tied, bleeding, humiliated, under a sky as wide and heartless as God's silence. As night fell, the town forgot her. Except one man. Luke didn't go to her. Not right away. He simply walked to the edge of town, lit a small fire under the cottonwood trees, and sharpened his knife. The sound of stone against steel was steady, clean. He wasn't a man who ran toward trouble. He was a man who waited for it to come to him. In the still dark, Eva whispered to the dirt, remembering her father's voice, cracked and warm. They'll break you, he used to say, but only if you think you were whole to begin with. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't pray. She waited. By morning, the bindings on her wrists were stained red from struggling, but they were loose. The well wall had a sharp edge on one brick. She worked the knot against it, slow and silent. When the sun rose, it caught her eyes, green, fierce, untamed. By the time the first door creaked open in town, Eva was gone. Jesse burst from the stable shouting, pointing toward the hills. She's loose. Get the dogs. Gunshots cracked like lightning. Hooves tore through the streets. The Gratches howled for blood. And in the corner of the saloon porch, Luke Carver set down his coffee, stood, and followed. He didn't run. He walked. The wind stirred again, dry and ancient. In its whisper, the truth lingered. The dust never lies. And now, neither would Eva May. She ran until her feet split open and the air in her lungs turned to fire. The cottonwood trees ahead shimmered through heat waves like some mirage spun out of pain and desperation. The only sound behind her now was the distant bark of dogs and the angry thunder of hooves, growing louder, then fading, then louder again. Eva May didn't stop to listen. Her dress was torn from the thigh down, the hem flapping like broken wings. Blood streaked her legs, dried on her lip. Every step forward was defiance. Every stumble, a prayer made in grit and spit. The cottonwoods ahead swayed in the breeze, their leaves whispering secrets. She reached them just as her knees buckled. She fell into the shade like a sinner falling into the arms of an unkind god. The bark of a nearby cottonwood scraped her shoulder. She dragged herself upright and pressed her back against it, panting like an animal. The cottonwoods had always meant peace. Her father used to walk her under them, carrying a sermon in one hand and a basket of warm bread in the other. That was a lifetime ago. Now, they watched her bleed. A branch snapped behind her. She reached for a rock, hand trembling, blood smearing the stone. "Tryin' to kill a rabbit or yourself with that thing?" The voice was dry, half amused. She turned. Luke Carver stood at the edge of the grove, hat shadowing his eyes. The late afternoon light caught the lines on his face, and something in him looked worn out, like a church bell rung too many times. A rifle was slung across his back, and a hunting knife hung off his belt like it belonged there. She didn't speak. "You're limp in. Left ankle. Might be sprained. Got a cut on the thigh, deep enough to need stitching." He took a step forward. "You'll last maybe another hour like that." She tightened her grip on the stone. "I ain't here to drag you back," he said. "Ain't here to save you either." "Then what the hell are you here for?" she spat, voice ragged. He tilted his head like he wasn't sure himself. "Maybe I'm just tired of watching good people rot while bad men sit fat in town." She didn't lower the rock. "You ain't gotta trust me," he added. "But you can walk with a limp through this dust, or you can die in it. Either way, it's your call." He turned his back and walked away. Eva stared after him. 10 seconds passed. 20. Then she dropped the stone. She followed. By twilight, they found shelter beneath an outcrop of red rock, where Luke built a fire with the ease of a man who'd done it 100 times. He cleaned her wound with whiskey, ignoring her hiss of pain. She didn't cry, didn't flinch. Just stared into the flames as if daring them to burn hotter. "You got a name?" he asked after a while. She hesitated. Then, "Eva." He nodded once, as though it was enough. Luke didn't ask her what happened. He didn't have to. This part of the territory didn't need reasons. It only needed power, and the Gratches had that in spades. The rest was just detail. After eating, she sat with her legs stretched toward the fire, bare feet dirty and swollen. Luke sat across from her, sharpening his knife in long, quiet strokes. The sound was steady, comforting in its own harsh way. "Why'd you leave?" she asked. He paused. "Because I know the taste of dust, and I know what it covers up," he said, not looking up. "I fought in a war that said it would make men free. All it made was graves. So I rode west. Thought the silence would fix me. Did it? No." She leaned back on her hands. "Then why stay?" He glanced at her then. "Maybe the silence don't fix you. Maybe it just helps you hear what you really are." They sat in silence for a long while after that. The fire popped. A lone coyote howled far off in the hills. Eva closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to remember her father's voice again. "You'll be the girl who makes dust tremble," he'd once whispered, half laughing as he lifted her above his shoulders. "Even the wind'll know your name." She didn't feel strong now. She felt broken and hunted and small. But something about the way Luke watched the night, rifle across his lap, made her believe that broken things could still be sharp. At dawn, she tried to leave. She didn't say a word. She just gathered her boots, now crudely tied with rope, and began walking east toward what looked like a distant road. Luke called after her. "You think you're heading somewhere, but you're just looping back to where they'll find you." "I don't need you," she muttered without turning. "No," he agreed. "But you do need a second chance. And you don't get that alone." She stopped. He walked up beside her, not touching, just standing close enough to share space. "I know a place," he said. "Old mining shack. Half burned down, but they don't go near it. Think it's haunted or cursed or something dumb like that." "You think it's safe?" "No such thing." They walked together after that. Hours passed under a high sky. Lizards darted from stone to shade. A hawk circled overhead. The land stretched endless in every direction, as if testing whether they deserved to cross it. Eva learned to walk quieter. Luke showed her where to step, how to listen for snakes, how to tell when wind was changing direction just by the way a bush leaned. They spoke less. He watched her practice loading the revolver he gave her. At first, she fumbled. Then, she didn't. He handed her a tin cup of creek water, and when their hands brushed, she didn't flinch. When she asked why he had so many scars across his arms, he just said, "Each one was a lesson I didn't learn the first time." That night, she sat on a boulder while Luke cut kindling. "I want to kill them," she said suddenly. Luke didn't look up. "The Gratches," she continued. "All of them." He finished what he was doing before answering. "Wanting ain't the hard part. Surviving after you get what you want, that's the curse." She stared at him. "You saying I shouldn't?" "I'm saying, revenge don't end with justice. It ends with you being someone they don't recognize. Or worse, someone you don't." She turned her gaze to the fire. Her voice dropped low. "What if that's all I have left?" Luke didn't answer right away. Instead, he took something from his coat and tossed it beside her. A small, worn book. Her father's Bible. She stared. "I found it in the ashes near the well," he said. "Figured you'd want it." Her fingers traced the spine like it might vanish. In that moment, her eyes burned, not from dust, not from smoke. Something older. She wiped them dry before he could see. As she sat quietly, Luke leaned back against a tree, eyes half closed. "You ever seen a man kneel without a rope around his neck?" he asked, voice soft. "No. You will." That night, under the cottonwood canopy, Eva didn't dream of fire or blood. She dreamed of a day when the dust knelt for her. The first shot came at dawn. Eva had just stirred from uneasy sleep when the air split with the unmistakable crack of a rifle. Bark exploded from the tree inches above her head. She dropped flat into the dirt without thinking, breath held, heart hammering like a war drum. Across the clearing, Luke was already rolling behind a log, pistol drawn, eyes scanning the tree lean. "2 men, maybe 3, he called low, calm. She nodded. She didn't need to speak. She grabbed the revolver from her boot and checked the chamber like he'd taught her. Loaded. The second shot came faster, kicked up dust by her leg. She rolled behind a boulder, pressing her cheek to the stone. Sweat beaded at her brow. This was no warning. They weren't here to scare her back to town. They were here to finish what the Gratches started. Luke raised his rifle and fired once, sharp and controlled. A scream answered from the brush. "They'll circle wide," he muttered, already moving. "They'll try to trap us in the creek. You move when I say." "No sooner." Eva nodded, gripping the revolver tight. Her fingers were steady. She was surprised by that. Another bullet hissed by, splintering a branch near her head. Luke pointed to a split in the rocks ahead. "Run." She didn't hesitate. She sprinted, dodging roots, stumbling over rocks. Gunfire cracked behind her. Luke followed, covering her with 3 more shots that echoed like thunder in the hollow. When she reached the split in the rocks, she dropped to one knee, turned, and fired back, instinct guiding her hand. One of the shadows flinched. Then it was quiet. Only the sound of wind and blood in her ears. Luke caught up moments later, crouching beside her. "You hit one. Low in the leg." Eva looked at her shaking hands. "First time I ever pulled a trigger on a man." He studied her face. "You'll remember it. That's the curse." They waited in silence, breathing hard, listening for movement. None came. "Think they ran?" she asked. "No," Luke said. "They're regrouping." They moved again, higher into the hills, toward an old mining shack blackened by time and lightning. Luke had passed it once seasons ago. No one lived here, no one dared. Locals whispered that the land was cursed after the mine collapsed and buried 13 men. Now it would be their shelter. The shack was crooked and half-collapsed, but the stone hearth inside still stood strong. Luke started a fire while Eva sat on the floor, reloading her revolver with trembling hands. "You all right?" he asked, watching her carefully. "I should be scared," she said. "But I'm not. I'm just angry." Luke nodded once. "Anger can keep you alive. Or get you killed. Depends on who's holdin' the reins." That night, under the cracked roof and flickering firelight, Eva asked him a question she'd held in her chest for days. "Why me?" Luke looked up from his knife. "Why help me? Why stay?" He didn't answer at first. Just watched the fire for a long time. "Back in Missouri," he said finally, voice low, "there was a family. Freed slaves. Good folks. Had a farm, didn't bother no one. Some men I rode with, they burned it down. Called it justice. I watched it burn and did nothing." His jaw tightened. He didn't look at her. Couldn't stop thinking about the girl. She was maybe 11. Stood there, watching the flames, didn't cry, didn't scream. Just stared at me. Like she knew I was worse than the ones with the torches, 'cause I did nothing. He paused. "You remind me of her. You got that same fire. That same quiet. I couldn't save her. But maybe I can help you not become the kind of ghost I see in the mirror." Eva said nothing for a while. Then, "You're not him anymore." "No," Luke whispered. "But the smoke still clings." The next morning, he began training her. At first, it was simple. How to clean her weapon. How to track footsteps in loose soil. How to tell the direction of the wind by licking the inside of her wrist. Then came the harder things. How to shoot while moving. How to reload blindfolded. How to gut a deer without wasting a single ounce of meat. She failed more than she succeeded, but she never stopped trying. Every bruise became a lesson. Every missed shot, a future promise. Luke pushed her harder with each sunrise. She met his pace. One day, after hours of training, Luke tossed her a can and said, "Shoot it midair." She raised her revolver. Fired. Missed. Again. Missed. Again. Bang. The can spun in the air, then dropped into the dirt. Eva lowered the revolver, chest heaving. "You were right?" "About what?" She met his eyes. "Anger ain't the problem. It's what I do with it." He smiled faintly. "That's the girl I've been waiting to see." But peace was temporary. Later that week, Luke returned from a supply run to a nearby trapper's post, face pale and jaw clenched. "They know you're alive," he said. Eva stopped stitching her torn sleeve. "Who?" "Bo Gratch. He's sending more men. Not thugs this time. He's bringing mercenaries. Professional killers. Wants this done before it spills into court." Eva stood slowly. "He's scared." Luke gave her a grim look. "And desperate." They both knew what that meant. Blood. They packed what they could carry. Guns. Ammunition. A small flask of whiskey. Luke showed her a map drawn in charcoal, outlining a plan. "We're not running anymore," he said. "We go back. Not to kneel. To stand." Eva nodded. "Then let's make sure the dust remembers our names." They returned at nightfall. Not through the road. Through the woods. Through the dry gulch and past the old broken fence that used to mark Holloway land. Eva stood in front of her father's burned chapel, now a ruin. Stones crumbled beneath her boots. The altar still stood, scorched, but upright. She placed her hand on it. "I'm home," she whispered. And the wind moved through the chapel like a ghost brushing past her skin. Word spread fast. By morning, the town knew she was back. And they waited, for her or for her funeral. Inside the saloon, Eldon Gratch slammed a fist on the table. "She's supposed to be dead," he snarled. "She ain't," the sheriff said, barely looking up from his drink. "And now she's got that damn ghost of a cowboy with her." Bo Gratch leaned back in his chair. "Then we kill 'em both. Daylight. Public. Make an example." The sheriff cleared his throat. "Lot of eyes on this now, Bo. Some folks startin' to wonder if maybe you're hiding something, da." Bo stood, slow and thunderous. "Then maybe it's time we reminded this town what happens when it questions a Gratch." Outside, the sun rose over Whittler's Hollow. And with it, the wind carried the scent of smoke and something older. Gunpowder. Eva loaded her weapon. Luke strapped on his holster. The time for silence was over. The town square of Whittler's Hollow never knew quiet, not real quiet, not the kind that made even the flies stop buzzing. But that morning, the dust didn't move, the horses didn't shift in their reins, and the people stood like stones at the edges of the street, waiting. Even the sun seemed to rise slower, stretching long shadows across the ground where justice and violence were about to meet. Eva May walked down the center of the road with her boots striking dirt like war drums. Her coat hung heavy with dust and sweat, and her revolver sat on her hip like it had grown there, like it was part of her now. Behind her, Luke Carver walked with the lazy gait of a man who knew exactly how many bullets were in his chamber, and exactly where he planned to put them. Every step forward was memory. Every crack of her boothiel echoed back her father's voice, the flames that took the chapel, the whip crack of Jessie's hand across her cheek, and the choking silence of townsfolk who'd watched and done nothing. Not today. Bo Gratch stood at the top of the saloon stairs, flanked by his sons and 5 hired guns, mercenaries with polished rifles and scarred faces. The Gratches looked the same as they always had, rich, cruel, and certain that no one would ever touch them. They weren't smiling now. "Morning," Luke said, stopping just before the saloon steps. His voice was mild, but something behind it carried steel. Bo didn't answer. Jessie shifted nervously. Eldon squinted at Eva like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "You're trespassing on Holloway land," Eva said, her voice steady. "This square sits on it. The chapel sat on it. You burned it. You beat me. You tried to bury me in the dirt you stole. You're lucky I didn't hang you," Bo spat. Eva stepped closer, her coat opening just enough to show the grip of her revolver. "You tried. I just didn't feel like dying that day." The mercenaries watched Luke. His hand hovered near his holster, loose and calm. It was a silent dare. The sheriff stood behind the crowd, chewing something slow. He didn't move. His badge caught a ray of sunlight and glinted like a guilty secret. "This town ain't yours," Eva said. "It never was. You wrote your name on paper, but my father wrote it in sweat and stone. That chapel out there, those fields, they weren't yours to take. Bo stepped down one stair. You think you scare me, girl? She looked him straight in the eye. No, she said. But I think you know what happens when fear changes sides. Bo reached for his pistol. The world paused. And then Luke moved. One shot. Fast. Precise. Bo's gun flew from his hand before he could draw. Blood spilled down his wrist. He stumbled, cursing, clutching his arm. Eldon lunged forward. Eva's revolver barked. A shot landed inches from Eldon's boots. Don't, she warned. Unless you want to limp forever. The town gasped, a collective breath held too long and suddenly released. The sheriff stepped forward. Slowly. Carefully. I reckon it's time some truths came out, he said, glancing at Bo. Time this town decided who it answers to. Bo's face twisted. I own this town. You used to, someone murmured from the crowd. It was a woman, Widow Jensen, who'd lost her fence line and 3 goats to Bo's hired men last spring. Then another voice, that land wasn't yours. A man now. The blacksmith. More murmurs. Then more voices. Rising. Bo looked around and saw the thing he feared most, the town remembering its spine. Eva stepped forward, standing taller than she ever had, the dust unmoving beneath her. On your knees, she said. Bo laughed. You must be joking. She didn't flinch. You dragged me through this dirt like I was nothing. Beat me. Called me a thief. And all I ever wanted was what was mine. Jesse lifted his rifle. Luke leveled his own. For one breathless moment, the town stood on the edge of chaos. Then Jesse dropped his weapon. And, slowly, like the world losing balance, Bo Gratch fell to his knees. The mercenaries didn't move. They weren't paid enough to die for pride. Eldon followed. Hands in the air. Bloodless. Eva looked down at the men who had once made her feel small. You don't kneel because I said so, she said. You kneel because you finally see who you were trying to break. The sheriff walked forward, slowly took Bo's pistol, and nodded at Luke. She's got more right to this land than you ever did, the sheriff muttered. Luke said nothing. He just holstered his weapon and turned toward Eva. They stood there in silence while the crowd swelled forward, not in panic, not in anger, but in something older, quieter. Respect. A few women stepped forward to help Eva. She waved them off gently. I'm staying, she said, turning to Luke. He didn't look surprised. I figured. There's a chapel to rebuild. A field to plant. A name to clean off the gravestone. He nodded. You leaving? She asked. I'm not meant for fences, he said. But I'll ride through now and again. They shook hands like soldiers who had seen war together. As the sun crested above the rooftops, casting long gold across the dust, Eva climbed the chapel steps. Stones broken, roof missing, but it still stood. Behind her, the dust no longer moved. It stood still. Because it remembered. Because now, it belonged to someone who had bled into it, who had suffered through it, and who had risen from it not with vengeance, but with purpose. She watched Luke ride off into the horizon, never once looking back. She didn't need him to. He'd already given her what no one else ever had, truth, trust, and the space to become something unbreakable. She turned back toward the town, revolver on her hip, fire in her chest. Not a victim. Not a ghost. A woman the dust would never dare forget.